just to please note that the public session of the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. So can all attendees switch off the camera and mute their microphone when not speaking? Camera and microphone should only be switched on if you're invited to speak. Guidance on how to do this is contained in the guidance issued to you previously. I will now ask the clerk to advise of the members participating today, and for all members to confirm their attendance once their name has been announced by the clerk, so that it's clear in the recording of the minute. It can also be recorded. Sorry, it can be recorded for the minute. Thank you, Mr. Orchard.
Thank you. We have a few substitutes today, so I'll just take a roll call. Convener.
Present.
Lord Provost.
Present.
Councillor Bolton.
Present.
Councillor Cameron.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Present.
Councillor Houghton.
Present.
Councillor Malik.
Present.
Councillor Alex Nichol.
Present.
And Councillor Yule.
Present.
Thank you. All present and correct. I'll hand back to you, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Orchard. And just before we begin matters today, I would just like to acknowledge the sad passing of His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Prince Philip was a great servant to the United Kingdom and the wider Commonwealth, working with over, I think it was 900 charities. And in particular, he was his affection to Scotland was well known, and indeed spent much time in the northeast of Scotland. So just like to put that on record. Moving to the agenda for today, determination of exempt business. We don't have any declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest? And apologies, I won't be able to see anyone's hand. So I'm just joined on my phone. No declarations of interest. Okay, I will move on to the main business. Agenda item number 4. Support.
Question, Convener.
Yes, Councillor Yule.
Thanks. If you can't see our hands, how do we indicate that we wish to speak? Do we just shout at you, or
just if you shout? Hopefully, my laptop will be back up and working soon, Councillor Yule. But I don't mind shouting at me today.
Well, no, request politely is what I mean, obviously. But okay, thank you, Convener.
Thank you. So moving on to the main business item number 4. Now, I believe Councillor Stewart, did you want to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Convener. It was just to say a few points, that was all, if I may, when it's appropriate.
Okay, that's fine. Then we'll start with any questions for the officers on this report.
Convener, I have. I think I've put up my hand, but
all right. Yes, Councillor Nichol, on you go.
Thank you very much, Convener. It was just really to ask officers if they could maybe just take us through how they propose this to work. I think we've been told that there is some information on the council's website under a guidance for business document. I wonder if they could maybe just take us through how it will work. I've actually had problems finding that document online. We rather have quite a lot of information, and it's possibly just one of these things that's quite difficult to find.
Do I have an officer to answer that question? And I'm back on my laptop now, so I should be able to see hands. Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Nichol, the easy way of doing it is obviously just to type in Spaces for People in the Aberdeen City Council website. That should take you to the Spaces for People page. Within that, there's advice there for the various businesses, the regulations you make, the information that's acquired in that consideration. From a practical point of view, what it usually envisages is potentially a visit on site. Historically, over the last year, I did a lot of that myself. Also, sometimes with the director of resources, go out, visit the location, speak to the business owner, etc., see what we can accommodate, if we can, give some advice for that. And then a formal application would come forward for the wider group. And that obviously looks at environmental health issues, road issues, planning issues, etc. And separately, there may very well be an application have to come forward to the licensing board. That's the general process for any application should it come forward.
And I wonder if I could ask a follow-up to that. Obviously, there is some kind of board involved here to decide, or what's proposed to decide applications. Who all will be present at that board, and what record will be kept?
There's minutes kept of the board meetings. You've got various chief officers there, myself, you've got Mark, operations, Gail, and various officers from planning and roads and environmental health.
And will it be on Teams, or will it be in private? Or
this is usually a Teams call because
okay.
of the situation.
And is that open to applicants to speak or make representations, as would happen perhaps in a licensing committee in the townhouse?
No, if there's any sensitivity with any particular location or difficulty, etc., initially that would be involved a visit with myself or another out to actually see the location, inspect it, to take consideration of that. Generally, I would generally give some advice when I'm out there, if whether it could be likely to be accommodated or not. Then I would take that issue back to the wider board to see what kind of information we have. If there's any follow-up, then I would take it back to the business.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Yule.
Thanks, convener. As a follow-up to Councillor Nicholl's question, would the minutes of this board be published, or would it simply be a list of decisions that were published?
Mr. Wilson, are you able to answer that?
It would just be usually the decisions that we published, Council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, and just a further follow-up really in terms of where one of these temporary structures has gone in place. Is there a mechanism whereby you might have approved something, but then experience says, actually, we thought it was going to be okay, but we've now changed our minds, and you withdraw the proposal? I mean, I'm thinking, for example, not on one of the structures, but on we had the Spaces of People, we had the Esselmont Rosemount bus gate that was put in and then was taken out fairly quickly because it came to the conclusion actually it wasn't working that well. So I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism for withdrawing something that's been put in.
Okay, Ms. Beattie, do you want to come in?
Sorry, apologies. I had it felt like I was in the meeting, but I wasn't able to get my camera back on. So, Councillor Cook, those measures would be covered off by a further report to City Growth and Resources. So, if there's any change to those physical interventions, as discussed at City Growth and Resources in February, that will come back. That will be subject to a further report. What we're dealing with in terms of this is that business support. So this report is clearly just about allowing a mechanism so that we can provide that support to businesses that wish to operate within this time. Now, the reason that it's here for this committee is obviously the route map was published after the City Growth and Resources in February, and we've subsequently had a letter from the Chief Planner and the Minister just explaining that the relaxation of those planning controls is expected to still stay in place, so that there's a flexible and supportive attitude towards these types of approaches to us. So the purpose of this report today is really just to be clear that whilst we were in emergency powers, that delegation sat with officers. the view is now from our colleagues in legal that we don't have that delegation. So the purpose of the meeting today is just to clarify that we have that delegated power. I hope that helps.
Yep, thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron?
Thank you, convener. It's just a follow-up on something Mr. Wilson said in relation to licensing. So if alcohol licenses are required for any of the businesses with these structures, these applications would definitely go to the licensing board in every case and not dealt with under delegated authority. Is that the case?
So just to be clear, the usual licensing processes will apply, whether that's a delegation or to the licensing board. Some of them, I'm not going to answer on licensing because that's not my particular area. However, it's just to be clear that the licensing process will continue. What we're talking about is just that physical occupation of the public realm. So we're not trying to delegate that approach in any way that changes the steps that are in place for licensing to deal with those.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Thank you, Mrs. Beattie.
Right. So just to confirm, Ms. Beattie, so there is obviously there is a standard way that those are dealt with, and there's no changes to that. This is just about occupation. It's not even of, you know, if premises are looking to have something in their own car park, for example, this doesn't apply. It's really just, as you say, when it's using the public realm that this delegation would be required. We have offered to give advice to businesses in their own car parks and their own private space, but our ability to give that authority sits very clearly within the public realm rather than within that private space. As I say, we have worked with a number of local businesses round about their car parks just to make sure that those other regulatory functions are covered off. So the environmental health considerations, because it's not just about the relaxation of planning. There still are other regulatory processes to be dealt with. Okay, thank you. Councillor Cameron, your hand is still up. Are you still got?
Sorry, no, that's a legacy hand. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Let me just see who else. I think it's Councillor Bolton. Is your hand up? Yeah, Councillor Bolton.
It is. Yeah. Thank you, convener. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
I think we're all having technical issues this morning. It was just really a follow-up with Mrs. Beattie around obviously we've had notification from the Scottish Government around people are supporting businesses with outside interventions. Can people still, for instance, I know if it's on our public realm, I think it would still require some sort of interaction with us, but given my understanding is that the letter got was we were told not to take any enforcement action against any of these structures. Is there a time limit on this, or how is that being, because I'm just struggling to make sure that we're keeping control of it, and I can see why this board is essential for that element, but otherwise, some people do things and we can't take intervention.
So I'll deal with it in two parts. So in terms of the building standards element of it, that was covered off by the Coronavirus Act. So that actually has an end date of it on it of the 30th of September. In terms of the planning letter, that is open-ended at the moment. It says to be supportive of businesses until until such times as you hear otherwise. So that's a different situation for the planning regulations. And whilst we are encouraged not to take enforcement action, we are clear to that we want to work with businesses to make sure that things are as appropriate as possible, not just for the public realm, but for the neighbours around them as well. So it is very much a balancing act. So whilst we can't take enforcement action, we want to work with people to get the best solution for the city.
Thank you. Can I just have a couple more questions?
Of course.
Lumsden,
Sensible.
convener. Yeah. Obviously, so if the structures are already in place, do they have to come back for extra permission from you, or can it just continue to run? And I'm talking about occupation of space rather than licensing or anything, because that's a separate process.
So not technically, but for many of these, they have checked back in with us. So that's why there's been so many queries over the short period when the route map was unveiled. So they don't have to get those things that already have our agreement, still have our agreement. However, there are a number of businesses that wish to sort of make amendments or just to check back in round about the circumstances in which they find themselves.
And can the other follow-up is obviously we've heard that licensing is a completely separate matter, and as a convener I understand the processes that we've got in place in terms of occasional licenses. But for instance, say something didn't get an alcohol license, that doesn't mean that it wouldn't exist, because it could obviously be selling teas and coffees or soft drinks and food. Is that correct?
So this is about the support for businesses. It's not about just support for licensed premises. So it's not just about the sale of alcohol. It's about the use of the public space. So whether or not that's someone wanting to put some tables out just so that they can accommodate people waiting for their takeaway food, or whether or not that's for a cafe type environment. This isn't just about supporting licensing. It's about that sort of wider business recovery plan.
Okay, sorry, convener, I've just got two final questions.
Of course.
The next one, so obviously we've got a pavement, cafe pavement sort of policy, which my understanding was delegated in terms of the occupancy of the space. So officers, why is that not relevant in this sphere at the moment?
I noticed that's a hand up. I'm just trying to see who it is.
Mr. Ritchie.
All right, Mr. Ritchie.
Thanks, convener. I can answer that one. Pre-COVID, roads had two methods of dealing with sort of similar applications, but a much smaller scale. The first one was the pavement cafe policy, and that basically within that policy is really based on the number of seats that are put outside a premise, and there was a set charge put per seat. The other one is obviously the occupation by developers and contractors, and again there was a charge set for that, and that's been approved through committee, and that's based on a square metre rate.
Okay.
So I was just, Mr. Ritchie, if you could maybe expand on why wouldn't the same sort of delegation, I know it's not about the cost I'm looking at, it's just the fact that you obviously have a delegation to approve. I mean, I'm thinking of one pre-COVID was like Brewdog, for instance, at the end of Broad Street on Union Street. That was obviously went through three processes, licensing, planning, because it's been both. And then obviously there was an occupation that Occupy was granted by officers. It's just so that it's very clear for the public why we're deviating slightly.
Convener, I wonder if it would be helpful to bring in a colleague from legal just to explain about the delegation issue.
Yep. Do we have somebody from legal? Mr. Bell, do you want to take that? Or?
Yeah, happy to come in, convener, and I'm on my mobile phone as well this morning. So we looked into the matter obviously in advance of the report being published, and took the view that there wasn't a sufficient delegation to cover the matters that are being discussed this morning, and also in terms of the applications that have come forward. I think what Mr. Ritchie is saying is that although we've got other policies in place, they don't quite provide the necessary delegation that's required for the types of applications for use of street space that we're talking about this morning. So from what I'm picking up from Mr. Ritchie is that the delegations that we currently have aren't sufficiently wide. In respect of the Brewdog matter, I don't know the particular circumstances of that case, so I'm not able to comment on that particular one.
Okay, Councillor Bolton, do you want to come back in there, or?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's just for sort of I appreciate we're not in normal times at the moment, but you know, tables and chairs on a pavement, or for instance, the Christmas market, you know, we would have occupation of this carriageway and the pavement. So it's just that I'm sure. I just wanted to make it clear for anybody who will view this afterwards why we're deviating from our normal practice. That's all. I mean, I understand about the charging regime and everything, but that's not really my point. It's about we're already improving tables and chairs. It's the whole safety thing. So it's just to show that we're not using different sets of rules, I suppose, and that there is an equity across the city.
Okay, Mr. Ritchie.
Thanks, Greener. Just to come back on that. Yes, you're probably correct that a similar situation like Brewdog, we probably could have handled through that, but certainly the scale of the number of applications we're getting, and also as well where we're occupying a road, that would normally be through a traffic regulation order. So again, you know, we're not applying that same process as Fraser has described.
Okay. Thank you. And my final question, it's probably, I don't know, it might be Mr. Wilson or whoever, but it's around, we've heard about the specific premise that might be applying. In terms of engagement with, you know, adjoining businesses, could we maybe just get a little insight on how we approach that? Because clearly what we don't want to do is to benefit one at the expense of another. So it's really just understand what engagement there is with neighbouring properties.
If I can maybe answer that, Convener, Councillor Ball, what the usual process is, if there's any application comes forward that we think impacts on neighbouring businesses, etc., we would make sure that the business that's putting in the application has a consultation carried out with neighbouring businesses, and we usually ask for some kind of letter of comfort to make sure that they are content with the proposal that's coming forward. If a marquee or a gazebo is set up and 2-3 weeks down the line a neighbouring business starts to complain for whatever reason, then we will certainly revisit that and have another look at it and try and, dare I say, facilitate an agreement between the neighbouring businesses. So just because it's in and approved, that is not the end. We are continually monitoring the applications and what's actually put on the street.
Thank you.
And I think, Mr. Wilson, an example of that would have been the grill, where things had to change because neighbouring businesses changed their mind. Is that?
That's correct, Convener. We've had to revisit that one 2 or 3 times because of comments that have been made by neighbouring businesses.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Convener. Just a very, very brief follow-up to that. As well as talking to neighbouring businesses, do we talk to neighbouring domestic premises? I'm thinking of not so much in the city centre, but in places like St Swithin Street, where you've got cafes, etc., next to dwelling houses. So do we talk to the neighbours if it's not a business?
Through the Convener, the general process would be, if I explain that initial consideration of the application, etc., and part of that consideration would be, is it in a residential area, etc. Should the application still be approved, then obviously environmental health would be there to monitor any issues regards to noise or whatever. I mean, that's, again, it's just because an application is approved, that's not the end of the matter. There is this continual monitoring of issues as should they come forward.
Thanks, that's helpful. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it's we'll talk to domestic premises as well as neighbouring businesses. Thanks, that was it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cook. And Councillor Bolton, did you want to come back in?
Yes, sorry, Convener. It's just really on that point. Clearly, we have an opportunity to affect a marquee or whatever it's on our land. But clearly there must be, there's obviously a constraint on what we can do if it's on their land themselves, in the premises land. So it was just, you know, I think we need to be very clear about whether it's public land or if it's within the curtilage of the premises. So Mrs. Beattie might want to just clarify.
No, as I said previously, this process is to deal with those applications or proposals that we are getting forward within the public realm. But we are, where we are made aware of complaints on private property, we do raise that back with the business, but clearly the onus is then on them to deal with that issue. So it's not the same level of control in a private space as it is within the public realm.
Okay, Councillor Bolton, your hand's still up, or is that anything else? Nope. Thank you, Councillor Yule.
Thanks, convener. And thank you for letting me come back in. It was just on the definition of public realm. Is that simply the roads and pavements, or would that it also include council property which is not part of the highway network? So hypothetical, putting something up in a park or on say council property which is not part of the highway highway network but is a public space.
So we're treating this as anything that's within the public realm, so that does include things that would be on council open space as well, where the council has an interest.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No. Okay, and just to formalise now, I'll be moving the recommendations contained in the report. Is anybody else minded to move anything else? Councillor Nicholl?
Thank you very much, convener. I think there's been some very interesting questions.
Councillor Nicholl, just before, I did promise that Councillor Stewart would be able to address the committee. Sorry, Councillor Nicholl.
Not a problem.
Councillor Stewart, sorry, Deputy Provost.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to just say a few words. Some of the conversations that have actually happened between officers and councillors has actually been helpful to hear. The reason I asked to come along, it was just really to say I am very much concerned, as I'm sure everyone is, about what's happening in the city and all the closures that there are. And you know, lots of people are speaking to me in both capacities or with both titles, just to say how much that they are concerned about what is happening to our city as a result of COVID, the pandemic, and all the businesses that are closing. And I most certainly would like to be able to do anything we can to assist businesses. I would just like it to be all businesses, you know, retail, hospitality, solicitors, architects, everybody that is actually operating, and everyone could actually work together, because I really feel their pain. I hear what young people are saying, I hear what older people are saying, and I just wanted to try and impart that to you all. And I am grateful that you've allowed me to just say a few words, that just want to do everything we can to help all businesses, the small ones, everybody, because this is our city. And I am worried. I mean, I really, really am worried about it and the future of Aberdeen. It's given me a home for 36 years. I know I'm not an Aberdonian, but my goodness, it's given me a home. And I always say, you know, my family's been brought up here. So for me, it is very important that everyone actually works together to assist all businesses and not offset one against another, as Councillor Bolton has also reflected in what she had to say. So it's really that, and I wanted to take the time to do this because I am genuinely worried, as I'm sure everybody else is, but I just really wanted to say that we can, that as a council, we can offer that confidence to business that we will most certainly do what we can to support everyone to get the high street up and running again, and to get businesses up and running again. I think so much weight is being put on the 26th of April, and people are just, you know, waiting to get going. So it was really just that. So I thank you for that, and just allow me to say, I suppose, pouring out my heart once again, but I genuinely feel the pain of others. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Deputy Provost. Very important point that's been made to help all businesses. Okay, we'll move to Councillor Nicholl now. Were you looking to move a change to the recommendations?
Thank you very much, convener. Yes, I was very interested in the discussions that officers have had, and I think it's answered a lot of the questions. But fundamentally, where I'm coming from is I don't think there's a need to delegate these powers to officers. I think it could be dealt with better by the committees that actually exist to deal with these matters. It would be more open, more transparent, and more accountable to the public to which we serve. We're the elected members. We should be taking these decisions, and we should be standing up and being counted for them. So that would be my simple amendment. I don't know how you're placed, whether you'd be willing to agree to that or not, but obviously we're in your hands.
Do you have a seconder? Is that Councillor Yule you seconding?
I am very happy to do so, convener. I would just echo what Councillor Nicholl has said. I don't question for a minute our staff and the commitment they have to doing this professionally, but it's fairly obvious, convener, that some of the decisions that have been made in relation to particularly the street occupations have been well, they've been difficult, but also they have resulted in some, well, let's say, some public discussion, not at times to say some outright hostility. And I don't question the reasoning behind our staff decisions, but I think if there's going to be grief directed at people for making these decisions, those people should be councillors and not our staff. We should listen to our staff's advice, but then we collectively should make those decisions, and then we should be held accountable for them, not our staff who are obviously doing a very, very difficult job in very difficult circumstances and doing it very well. But I firmly believe, convener, that we should be ones who, if decisions are made and people disagree with those, we should be the ones taking the flak, not our staff.
Okay. As I said earlier, I would I will be moving the recommendations as they appear today. I think there is almost an urgency in some of these decisions to be made. The applications that come in, you know, businesses are looking to open up in just I'm just looking at the calendars now, just about 2 weeks' time. I think there needs to be a lot of flexibility around this. I think we should be acting to do as much as we possibly can to allow businesses to open again. You know, we heard from Councillor Stewart as well that businesses are really, really hurting out there. And I think it's important that we do as much as we can, and we need to be as quick as we can and as flexible as we can. I think overall, you know, if we are looking at licensed premises, for example, you know, there is still a process there where things could be revoked and things could be changed, and that would come to the licensed committee, and I think that's right and appropriate. But I think when we're dealing with this, I still feel we're almost in an emergency situation when it comes to getting businesses working again, because we are in an emergency when it comes to our high street. So I'm happy to move the recommendations as they appear. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yeah, I can be there. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Houghton. Thank you. Do you wish to send in, Councillor Houghton?
Apologies, sorry, I've got a cough that's just overtaken me. Yes, happy to second you, convener, on this. I agree with you. I think expediency is the key issue here. We all sense it. We all know it, and there's a real sense of urgency in getting, especially as the rules start to relax over the next couple of months, and getting the city reopened. And I think that's key. I think it's the concerns that have been raised are entirely legitimate, and I think officers have given me the reassurances around those concerns. And of course, this is something that, you know, if a future meeting we as elected members have even greater concerns about, it's something we can obviously change. So I'm comfortable for now with this. We're moving forward with these proposals. I'm happy to support you, convener.
Okay. Councillor Nicholl, did you want to say anything else? Obviously, you said something previously when you to formally move your.
I don't know if anybody wants to enter into debate first, convener. I
Yeah,
don't know.
no, of course. It just because obviously we move things slightly differently. So, anybody like to join the debate?
I think, in fairness, it would be giving me a second bite of the cherry before I get to sum up. So,
Indeed.
and I've kind of summed it up anyway. So I know we've done it in a backwards manner, but I think I'll be fair and bide my comments for summing up. Please.
Thank you, Councillor Cook.
Oh, there we are. Sorry. Yeah, I'm having IT problems at the moment as well, convener. Thank you. I think basically what Councillor Nicholl said and what Councillor Ewell said is essentially where I'm coming from. And actually, I agree with the vast majority of what you said, what Councillor Horton said, and what Councillor Stewart said. I think we all agree that businesses are suffering. We need to cut them some slack, be as supportive as we can. There are things around the city that I think in normal times we wouldn't for a minute countenance, but where at the moment, because of the pressure that the businesses have been under, we do need to give them a helping hand and support. So, as I say, don't disagree with most of what you've said. I do feel, though, that we ought to be, as elected members, the ones who stand up and say, we're doing this because business needs support. And if folk don't like it, we're the ones that should take the flak, not the officers. Simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Anybody else wishing to join the debate? No, we'll move to sum up then. Councillor Nicholl, did you want to say anything else?
Yes, thank you very much,
Sorry,
Councillor Lumsden.
Do your hand? Sorry, I missed a hand. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Councillor Lumsden. Sorry, convener. You know, we've obviously had quite a lot of questioning of officers today, because I think it's really, really important that we understand completely the process and the reason why that they're recommending that the delegation goes to them. And I think it is down, particularly at the moment, to the time frame. We've obviously had, you know, the roadmap come out. We've obviously all been watching the numbers, so we needed to understand if the roadmap was going to sort of progress. And I think it's about being flexible, nimble of foot. And I think we all know how long it takes for officers if they've got to give us reports, they've got to come to pre-reports, to then full reports. And my concern would be the delay that would impact on the businesses. Now, we've heard from Mr. Wilson, you know, articulately put that, you know, if there are problems, they are there. And I know certainly from some of the experiences over the previous ones, that they did get involved when there was complaints by either neighbouring properties or just a general feeling from elected members that they wanted them to review a situation. And there has been alterations to some of them. And I think what we're in risk of doing at the moment is delaying the businesses opening, or the businesses opening with perhaps not the same interaction with our officers. So the quality of what's actually then delivered may not be what we'd be happy with. Now, I know that we've suggested at 2.6 a report can come back to City Grow in the future, and I think perhaps I'll leave it to you, convener, but it might be quite good to put a date on that so that people do recognise that we'll see a list of what has happened, and so that it's not completely left just on the website. But, you know, I have confidence in our officers. And that's not just because of what's happening at the moment, but, you know, and this is why I raised the point about the pavement policy. We'd already given that delegation prior to COVID. And my concern was, you know, were they asking for a delegation they really had? And, you know, I accept Mr. Ritchie's explanation, but, you know, I personally, I think that, you know, in my view, and I'm not obviously the person giving them legal advice, but, you know, I feel they already have the delegation. So they have experience of doing this. We've had things like the Christmas market. We've had lots of different things, even in my own ward. I know where we've managed to have occupied public realm, and it's been given occupation rights by the officers. And, you know, I would suggest that we haven't had any issues over it. Now, I know we're in a very different set of time at the moment, but I think we do have to understand that nimble of foot is absolutely essential at the moment. And I think, you know, the Scottish Government are obviously having to change and move very quickly, and they've said that themselves, that they often have very little notice if they need to change or add to restrictions. And I think by adding in a delay factor at our end, we're not actually working then hand in hand with the Scottish Government. So it's almost like, you know, the Scottish Government saying, well, we've told the local authority that they can get on with it, but we're actually putting in a little bit too much bureaucracy at this stage. But I'm reassured, because I think Councillor Stewart and I had a 2-hour phone call yesterday discussing the situation, because we're obviously very concerned that we don't want to see any of the neighbouring properties disadvantaged. You know, we've obviously seen the closure of Debenhams, we've seen the impending closure of John Lewis. So what we want to do is make our city centre vibrant, and we want to make it attractive. And you know, and I've got great confidence in Beattie from a planning perspective, and her team, who know that we're looking for quality, not just quantity, in Union Street in terms of any sort of cafe or anything. So, you know, I think by making sure that our officers are on the streets interacting with these businesses, that all businesses, you know, we stress that it's not just about hospitality, that, you know, we'll hopefully get the best results. But I think we should all be very aware that if we're not happy, we have the right to pull it back to a committee. We've heard about licensing. I'm the convener of the licensing board. It's not the licensing committee. I'll just remind everybody. You know, we advertise when there's occasional licenses coming forward. Anybody who has the right to put in a representation to that. If there's representations, it does come before a subcommittee of the board. So, you know, there is that extra cover. We can't, once it's issued, we can't revoke it. It has to run its course, and that's why very careful consideration of how long we or how many occasional licenses at once somebody can actually apply for. So, you know, there's other measures being put in place. I appreciate there will be those who like what's happened, and there will be those who don't, and I fully understand that. But at the moment, you know, I think businesses are struggling to make sure, and it's not just the business. We have to remember, underneath this business title, there's individuals who have livelihoods, who need this money. There might be a student trying to get past, you know, being away from home and being able to have food to buy with this extra money if they work in a hospitality sector. It could be, you know, people on low income, who it could be a second job, it could be their main job. You know, we have to remember these are people's jobs we're playing with at the moment. So, you know, for me, if us taking that extra few weeks, or maybe longer, because we all know how the lead into committees are, and even taking urgent committees all the time, we still got reports to be written. If that means that somebody loses their job, I don't feel that I've got a big enough concern that officers are not doing the right thing and doing the best job that I would take that. So I'll be supporting you, convener, but I will be keeping a very close eye on how things progress. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Malik.
Thanks very much, convener. I think the business community is extremely under pressure, and we have to support as much as we can. And we asked some very valid questions this morning, and we got answers. So I am sure our officer will make a right decision, and we can give them the power to make a decision on delegated power. And as we had from Councillor Stewart, that our local community is very worried about businesses, and you have seen the big list of some businesses are closing their doors in local press. Now, the licensed business, they will come, all of the license application will come to the licensing board anyway, but we have to support all of the businesses whatever we can. And if, of course, councillors, elected members are accountable, and if there is any issue, the public will not ask question to officer, they will come to us, they will approach elected member, and then we can take action whatever is required. So I think I would be supporting recommendation, Councillor Lumsden. Thanks very much.
Councillor Malik. Sorry, is there anyone else now wishing to join debate? I'm looking at the. No, there's definitely no more hands. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, convener. I would have very much aligned myself with the comments of Councillor Cook earlier. I think we're all agreed on whole large part of this. This is actually about opening up the city and getting back to some form of normality. But I do think, you know, as I said in my opening comments, this is about openness, transparency, and accountability. And we are the people who stood as councillors in Aberdeen City Council to take decisions on behalf of the good folk of Aberdeen. And I think this is something we should be doing. If I could turn for a moment to two words that were used during the debate, urgency and expediency. That was used as a rationale for why we shouldn't come back to councillors taking these decisions, which, as has been said by members, at times have been controversial, to say the least, and at times have been challenging. And it's been some very difficult decisions for officers. But what we are suggesting is effectively 3 chief officers will meet with a group of their subordinates and will have a meeting and will take a decision. Well, why can't that meeting be a committee of councillors? I really find the paperwork argument to be rather flimsy in terms of its content, because as we often see in the licensing committee, very, very short reports to decide whether or not a licence should or should not be granted. And I don't think that any information that is being placed before a board needs to be any less or any more than we would expect to see placed before a committee of councillors of this council. So I really don't think that particular argument stands up to any kind of close scrutiny. As we've heard from officers, licensing matters will still come back to the board, and the board already often have to meet at relatively short notice to take decisions, and they manage to do that with great professionalism and the help of officers to do that. So why we cannot simply put in place measures to ensure that councillors can be called at relatively short notice to discuss these matters in the coming weeks and months ahead, I really don't find that to be a very strong argument. Whether we call it a board or a committee of councillors, I would prefer it to be a committee of councillors. And my simple argument is it's open, it's transparent, it's accountable, it's what we are paid for, it's what we were elected to do. We should bash on and do it. And as Councillor Yule correctly said, we should take the flak for it if people aren't happy with those decisions. We shouldn't be delegating that to our officers. I'll leave it at that, Convener. I think we've had a very good discussion this morning. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Nicoll, and I will agree with you that I think we have had a good discussion this morning. A couple of points I want to make in the recommendations of 2.6 about having the decisions come back to due course to the CGNR. I would be really asking for officers to take that a list of all the decisions that were taken back to the next CGNR committee, and also the delegation could be looked at that point also. I think I think we got a dog barking in the background. I think we do have to look at what we have in front of us. We have a reopening, hopefully a reopening of much of the city in 2 weeks' time. I know that there's many applications coming in at this time, and I think it's right that officers do all they can to allow businesses to open. I would have actually potentially had more sympathy, Councillor Nicoll, if you'd actually set out what could have potentially have been a subcommittee structure or a way of allowing these decisions to come back to a subgroup of councillors. if you'd set that out today, it might have been something I could have actually supported, but because there's actually no detail in your amendment, that I can't really support that today, because I do feel that the urgency that we have, you know, we've been asked by government as well to do everything we can to allow businesses to open. So I think the way that's been set out in the recommendations is the right way for us to go just now. So on that, can we go to the vote, please, Mr. Orchard?
Thank you, convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener and an amendment in the name of Councillor Alex Nicholl. Would members please vote motion or amendment? Convener?
Motion.
Lord Provost?
Motion.
Councillor Bolton?
Motion.
Councillor Cameron?
Amendment.
Councillor Cook?
Amendment.
Councillor Houghton?
Motion.
Councillor Malik?
Motion.
Councillor Alex Nicholl?
Amendment.
Councillor Yule?
Amendment.
That's 5 votes for the motion, 4 votes for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Orchard, and thank you all councillors for that debate. Sorry, Councillor Bolton, did you want to?
Yeah, sorry, convener. I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Orchard noted that the 2.6 was amended to come back to the next city growth rather than in due course.
I did, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And a
That's
review,
fine.
and also mentioned a review of delegation at that point, Mr. Orchard. Yeah, that's been captured.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5. This is the bid proposals. Obviously, this is in public, but there is some parts of this appendices that are exempt, so we can just be careful, committee, that we don't stray into that during the public session. Any questions for officers, please? In public? No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Just in terms of the franchise on the vote when it takes place, can officers confirm that it'll be the businesses in the respective geographical area that are paying non-domestic rates, regardless of whether or not they're trading? So you could have a business which owns a premises, is paying non-domestic rates, but is not any longer trading. Will they still be able to vote?
Do you have an officer that could answer that one?
Good morning. Yes, Amy Ferguson here. I can confirm that that would be the case if a property is vacant. They can still, the property payer can still vote the ratepayer.
Thanks. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, convener. Kind of a similar sort of question. Obviously, before one of the reasons we deferred this matter at a previous meeting was obviously the problems of people not trading and being able to communicate with them. I wonder if we could have some commentary from officers in and around where we are with that, and are we quite confident that all 800 or so traders that are affected by this will have a full opportunity to participate in the process?
Do you have an officer to answer that?
Yes, so the Aberdeen Inspired are currently undertaking a full communications campaign at the moment. Obviously, it's a bit more difficult because of COVID, but they are trying as much as possible to engage all of the eligible voters. So they're undertaking that at the moment, and that's began early this year, and actually I think it also took place at the end of last year as well.
Okay.
Convener, could I have a follow-up to that?
Yes, you're probably going to ask, but I was just about to ask. Councillor Nicholl, on you go.
Oh, if you want to go first, convener, but it was obviously, you know, what steps are we actually taking to ensure that these people are A, contactable, and B, have an opportunity to participate? Are we doing media coverage? Are we putting out letters to these businesses? And where we know that the people, obviously, we may have other contact details for them, are we using all that? It's just to have as great a participation as possible in the process. It's an important democratic process, and it's just to sort of seek some assurances around that.
Mr. Sweetnam, did you want to come in at this point? I guess it's a task for Aberdeen Inspired initially. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think thank you, convener and Councillor Nicholl. I think as Ms Ferguson says, yes, the campaign and the engagement is all being led by Aberdeen Inspired, using a variety of methods. So as far as offices are concerned, yes, that engagement is taking place and will continue to take place indeed.
Okay. Can I just ask Mr. Sweetnam, in terms of, if you know, does there need to be a certain percentage of the levy payers that actually vote? And you know, I believe there is, isn't there, for any ballot to be successful?
There is, yes. I'm just in terms of the eligibility, I think before the ballot, there's a minimum of 5% of eligible voters must indicate in favour of the bid. And I think in the report in Appendix 1 there is some details there in terms of the eligible voters that have indicated a positive response.
Okay.
Mr. Ingalls might articulate it better than I.
Yes, thank you, convener. It's set out very briefly on page 42 of the agenda, which I'm just looking for just now at the top of that page.
Which is restrictive. So, yeah. Okay. So as long as we know it's
yes, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Yule.
Thank you, convener. Two questions, if I may. The first one is to Mr. Sweetnam. On the basis that we approve these recommendations and he is appointed returning officer, I note at 4.3, I think it's 4.3, that he would be outsourcing the ballot arrangements. Has he identified to where he would outsource that? Or is there going to be a tender process, or how will that be arranged? So that's question one. Question two is to ask, could I be reminded, please, what the arrangements are for, again, on the basis that we approve these recommendations, for the council to decide how it casts its vote, I think it's votes rather than vote, but how the council casts its votes in any ballot. Thanks, convener.
Okay. Mr. Bell, did you want to cover the outsourcing of the ballot?
Yes, certainly. We have identified a supplier to support us with delivering this ballot. There won't be a tendering process. That's largely because there is a very narrow field in terms of organisations that can deliver this for us, and the relatively small cost involved when you take into account the procurement regulations. Hopefully Mr. Sweetnam can assist with the second question.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, in terms of the second question, so subject to the committee's decision today, officers will bring a full report back to council on the 21st of June with their recommendation on how the council should vote. Today's committee is related to the veto process, but Councillor Yule, yes, on the 21st of June, a report will be provided to council in terms of officer recommendations on the vote itself.
Okay, Councillor Yule.
Thank you, convener, and thanks, Mr. Bell and Mr. Sweetnam. I just wanted to check, it is Mr. Sweetnam who's going to be the returning officer, not Mr. Bell, despite Mr. Bell answering the question about the outsourcing. Is that the case?
Convener, as much as it's tempting to pass on the responsibility to Mr. Sweetnam, it will be myself.
In which case, Convener, can I ask, are we going to amend recommendation, or are you going to propose amending recommendation 2.2, which recommends appointing Mr. Sweetnam as returning officer?
And sort of the Chief Officer Governance as returning officer.
Oh, in which case, I apologise. I am not for the first time talking complete rubbish.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Any further questions? No. Could we approve the recommendations, or Councillor Ewell, your hand up? Are you moving something else?
Convener, it's a legacy, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. A slight pause there. In fact, I should have asked first, is there any questions on the exempt appendices?
No.
No, okay. So we have in fact agreed the recommendation. Okay, so that is the end of the meeting. Can I just thank everyone for taking part, and apologies for the delay at the start with my IT issues. Okay, thank you everyone.
Well, thanks, the chair.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Convener.
Thank you.
Right.